Patricia, table 6 needs their check, and the kitchen's running behind on the salmon orders. I looked up from the restaurant management software where I'd been tracking tonight's revenue numbers, nodding at my assistant manager while keeping one eye on the dining room floor. Saturday nights at Meridian required constant attention. We were booked solid with a 2-hour wait list, and everything had to run like clockwork to maintain our reputation as the city's premier fine dining establishment. I'm Patricia Caldwell, 41 years old, and I spent the last 15 years building this restaurant from a failing neighborhood bistro into a $3.2 million annual revenue operation. Most people don't realize the complexity of managing a high-end restaurant: inventory control, staff scheduling, vendor negotiations, health department compliance, profit margin analysis. It's essentially running multiple businesses simultaneously, all while ensuring every guest has a flawless experience. Tonight was particularly important because we were hosting a private event in the back dining room. Mom's 65th birthday party, organized by my stepfather Richard. He'd insisted on having it here, probably to show off to his children that he could afford to rent out the private dining area of an upscale restaurant. What he didn't know was that I'd comped the entire evening as a gift to Mom, though I'd let Richard believe he was paying the full $2,800 bill. "Patricia, your family's asking for you," my Samlia mentioned as he passed by with a bottle of the 2018 Burgundy Richard had specifically requested, a $180 bottle that he'd ordered 3 of to impress his guests. I glanced at my watch. 7:30. I'd been managing the front of house since 5, ensuring everything was perfect before joining the family celebration. The restaurant was running smoothly now, and my evening manager could handle things for the next few hours. I walked through the main dining room, checking tables automatically. Every server was where they should be, glasses were full, plates were cleared promptly. After 15 years, I could assess the entire operation with a single sweep of my eyes. This restaurant was my life's work, my proof that someone from a working-class background could build something substantial through sheer determination and attention to detail. The private dining room was filled with laughter and conversation. Mom sat at the head of the long mahogany table, wearing the pearl necklace I'd given her for Christmas last year. She looked radiant in her navy blue dress, surrounded by flowers and flickering candles. For a moment, I felt genuinely happy seeing her so celebrated. Richard dominated the other end of the table, holding court with his usual collection of business associates and family members. At 58, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd inherited his father's construction company and spent 30 years coasting on established relationships. He wasn't stupid, just profoundly incurious about anything outside his narrow sphere of golf, bourbon, and complaining about taxes. His children from his first marriage, Marcus and Cheryl, flanked him like royal courtiers. Marcus was 35, recently divorced, and working in middle management at Richard's company despite showing no particular aptitude for construction. Cheryl was 32, married to a pharmaceutical sales rep, and spent most of her time managing her children's elaborate extracurricular schedules while posting about it extensively on social media. "Patricia," Richard called out as I approached the table. "There's our successful restaurateur. Come sit down. We were just talking about family legacy." I took the empty chair beside Mom, accepting the glass of wine that Marcus poured for me. The conversation continued around me as I settled in, catching fragments about property values and investment strategies, topics that Richard considered himself an expert on despite his consistently mediocre financial results. "The point is," Richard was saying to his business partner Dave, You have to think about these things in terms of blood. Real family. That's what matters when you're talking about legacy and inheritance. Mom's smile faltered slightly, though she tried to hide it by taking a sip of wine. I knew that particular expression. The one she wore when Richard said something that bothered her, but she didn't want to cause a scene. Blood is thicker than water, Cheryl agreed, raising her glass. Family takes care of family. Exactly, Marcus chimed in. That's why Dad's been so smart about structuring his estate planning, making sure everything stays in the bloodline. I continued eating my salmon, observing the conversation without participating. This wasn't unusual. Richard's family had a way of talking around me, rather than to me, as if I were a dinner guest rather than Mom's daughter. After 8 years of marriage to Mom, Richard had never quite figured out how to relate to me, and his children had simply followed his lead. Speaking of estate planning, Richard said, standing up with his wine glass, I think this is the perfect time to make an announcement. The table quieted, all attention focused on him. Mom looked up with interest, probably expecting him to announce a vacation or perhaps a renewal of their vows. Richard loved grand gestures, especially when he had an audience. As most of you know, Linda and I have been working with our attorney to update our wills and estate documents. It's important to have these things properly organized, especially at our age. He paused for effect, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. We've made some important decisions about inheritance and family legacy. From now on, only real family, blood family, will have inheritance rights to our estate. The room erupted in applause. Marcus raised his glass enthusiastically, Cheryl clapped her hands together, and Dave nodded approvingly. Richard's business associates murmured approval about the wisdom of keeping wealth in the bloodline. Mom sat perfectly still, her wine glass halfway to her lips, her face carefully neutral. She hadn't known about this announcement. I could tell by the way her shoulders tensed and her breathing became shallow. That's fantastic news, Dad, Marcus said loudly. It's exactly the right thing to do. Family loyalty should be rewarded. Absolutely, Cheryl added. This way everyone knows where they stand. No confusion, no hurt feelings later on. I set down my fork carefully, watching Mom's reaction. She was staring at her plate, processing what Richard had just announced to a room full of people without consulting her first. This wasn't estate planning. This was a public declaration designed to put me in my place. Richard, Mom said quietly, perhaps we should discuss this privately later. Nothing to discuss, honey. We agreed on this weeks ago. Remember? When we met with the attorney. From Mom's expression, I could tell that whatever conversation he was referencing hadn't gone the way he was now describing it. Of course, she said faintly. I just thought. The beauty of this arrangement, Richard continued, addressing the table like he was giving a board presentation, is that it clarifies everything. My children inherit from me. Linda's biological family inherits from her. Clean lines, no complications. What about Patricia? Asked Dave's wife, apparently not reading the room. What about her? Richard replied with a dismissive shrug. She's done very well for herself. With this restaurant, she doesn't need our help. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Not the disinheritance itself. I'd never expected or wanted Richard's money. It was the public nature of the announcement, the way he turned Mom's birthday celebration into an opportunity to formally exclude me from the family. I need to check on something in the kitchen, I said, standing up smoothly. Please excuse me for a moment. No one protested my departure. They were too busy congratulating Richard on his wisdom and discussing the various benefits of bloodline-based inheritance. I walked through the main dining room, past the busy servers and satisfied customers, into the kitchen where my head chef was plating the evening's final orders. The familiar chaos of a working kitchen, calling out orders, sizzling pans, precise movements, usually calmed me. Tonight, it felt like background noise to the conversation I needed to have. I stepped into my office, a small space behind the kitchen that I'd furnished with a desk, 2 chairs, and filing cabinets containing 8 years of business records. I kept my personal documents here too, including the manila folder marked Mom, Insurance, that I pulled from the bottom drawer. Inside were 8 years of premium payment receipts for Mom's $750,000 life insurance policy. I'd taken over the payments when she and Richard got married, not because she couldn't afford them, but because her income was irregular, and I wanted to ensure the policy never lapsed. Mom worked part-time as a substitute teacher, and her paychecks varied significantly from month to month. The insurance premiums were $3,200 annually, not a huge amount for me, but significant enough for someone on a fixed income. The policy had been originally purchased when I was in college, with me as the sole beneficiary. Mom had wanted to ensure I'd be financially protected if something happened to her. When she married Richard, she'd mentioned updating the beneficiaries, but had never followed through with the paperwork. I'd been sending the premium payments directly to the insurance company for so long that she'd probably forgotten I was still listed as the only beneficiary. I picked up my office phone and dialed the insurance company's customer service line. It was Saturday evening, but their phone system operated 24 hours for policyholders. "Thank you for calling Lifetime Financial Services. This is Jennifer speaking. How can I help you today?" "Hi, Jennifer. This is Patricia Caldwell. I need to verify some information about policy number LFF 4,471,892. I'd be happy to help with that. Can you please provide the last 4 digits of the policyholder's Social Security number?" I recited Mom's Social Security digits, along with my own information as the designated contact and premium payer. "Thank you. I see you're listed as both the beneficiary and the authorized contact for premium payments. What information did you need to verify?" I wanted to confirm the current beneficiary designation and premium payment status. "Certainly. The current beneficiary is Patricia Caldwell. That's you, listed as sole beneficiary for the full death benefit of $750,000. The policy is current and in good standing, with premiums paid through December of this year. And if the policyholder wanted to change the beneficiary, what would that process require? The policyholder would need to complete a beneficiary change form, had it notarized, and submit it to us with appropriate identification. The change would take effect upon receipt and processing. How long does processing typically take? For a standard beneficiary change, usually 3 to 5 business days once we receive the completed documentation. "Thank you. That's very helpful." I hung up and sat back in my chair, looking at the premium payment receipts spread across my desk. 8 years of $3,200 annual payments, $25,600 total. Money I'd spent gladly because I loved Mom and wanted her to have security. Money that had maintained a $750,000 life insurance policy that Richard apparently had no idea existed. The irony was perfect. Richard had just publicly declared that only blood family deserved inheritance rights, unaware that Mom's most significant financial asset would pass directly to me, regardless of what his attorney had written into their wills. I returned to the dining room as dessert was being served, the restaurant's signature chocolate souffle with raspberry coulis. The conversation had moved on to vacation plans and golf handicaps, but the damage from Richard's announcement still hung in the air. Mom was picking at her dessert, contributing little to the conversation. "Everything running smoothly out there?" Richard asked when I sat down. "Always does," I replied evenly. "Must be nice having your own business," Marcus said. "Complete control over everything. It has its advantages." "Though I imagine it's a lot of stress," Cheryl added. "All that responsibility. Sometimes I think it would be easier to just work for someone else and not worry about all the business details." "Different people are built for different things," I said diplomatically. The party continued for another hour, with Richard holding court and his children laughing at his stories. Mom gradually became more animated, either accepting the evening's earlier announcement or deciding to deal with it later. When people began making departure excuses, I helped coordinate the logistics, getting coats, arranging cars, ensuring the elderly guests had rides home. "Patricia, thank you for hosting us here," Richard said as he waited for the valet to bring his BMW around. "The food was exceptional, as always. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Your mother is lucky to have such a successful daughter," he continued, in what I assumed was his version of a peace offering, "even if you're not technically family in the legal sense. I understand the distinction you're making." He nodded, apparently satisfied that I'd accepted my new status gracefully. Mom hugged me goodbye, whispering "thank you for a lovely evening" without meeting my eyes. I could tell she was embarrassed by Richard's announcement, but didn't know how to address it without causing a bigger scene. The following Monday morning, I sat in my attorney's office reviewing the implications of Richard's estate planning announcement. Legally, he can structure his will however he wants, my attorney Sandra explained. If your mother agreed to exclude non-biological children from inheritance, that's their decision to make. "I'm not concerned about Richard's money," I told her. "I'm more interested in understanding what this means for Mom's assets." "That depends on how their assets are titled. If they own everything jointly with rights of survivorship, then the surviving spouse inherits everything regardless of what their individual wills say. But if they have separate assets, then each person's will governs what happens to their individual property." "What about life insurance?" "Life insurance bypasses the will entirely. It goes directly to the named beneficiaries according to the policy documents." I pulled out the insurance policy information I'd brought with me. Sandra reviewed it carefully, noting the beneficiary designation and premium payment history. "This is interesting," she said. "Your mother has a substantial life insurance policy with you as the sole beneficiary, and you've been paying the premiums. Unless she changes the beneficiary designation with the insurance company, this money goes to you regardless of what her will says, even if her will specifically excludes non-biological children. Life insurance is a contract between the policyholder and the insurance company. The will has no effect on insurance proceeds unless the beneficiary designation specifically names the estate as beneficiary. And if Richard doesn't know about this policy, then he's in for a surprise if he's counting on it as part of his inheritance planning." That afternoon, I received a call from Mom asking if we could have lunch together. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, away from Richard's usual haunts. "I owe you an apology," she said immediately after we'd ordered. "Saturday night was. I didn't handle that well." "You don't need to apologize for Richard's announcement." "Yes, I do. The way he presented it, making it sound like we discussed it and agreed. That wasn't how it happened." She stirred her coffee nervously, organizing her thoughts. "We did meet with an attorney about updating our wills. Richard has substantial assets from his business, and he wanted to ensure his children inherited his construction company and related investments. That part made sense to me. And your assets? That's where it got complicated. Richard assumed that since we're married, everything should be joint property with mutual inheritance rights. But some of my assets are separate. Things I owned before we married, my retirement accounts, my life insurance policy. What did you tell the attorney? I said I needed time to think about it. I've been meaning to talk to you about this, but Richard seemed to interpret my hesitation as agreement. She looked tired, older than her 65 years. The stress of trying to balance Richard's expectations with her own feelings was clearly wearing on her. Mom, you don't have to justify your financial decisions to me. Your money is yours to distribute however you think is right. But it's not just about money. It's about family, about belonging. When Richard made that announcement, it felt like he was publicly declaring that you're not really my daughter. Aren't I? Of course you are. You're my daughter, period. The fact that Richard's children share his DNA doesn't make them more family than you are. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the implications of Saturday night's announcement. Can I ask you something? Mom said finally. When you took over paying my life insurance premiums, was that because you didn't trust Richard to handle it? I considered how to answer honestly without being hurtful. It was because I wanted to ensure the policy stayed current regardless of other circumstances. Your income fluctuates, and insurance companies don't accept late payments gracefully. And the beneficiary designation? You're listed as the policyholder. You can change the beneficiaries anytime you want. She nodded slowly. I should probably review all of that, make sure everything is current and reflects my actual wishes. Probably a good idea. Would you help me? I know you handle your own business finances, so you understand these things better than I do. Of course. The following week, Mom and I spent an afternoon reviewing all of her financial documents, bank accounts, retirement plans, the life insurance policy, and a small investment account she'd inherited from her parents. The picture that emerged was complicated. Most of her assets were indeed separate property, acquired before her marriage to Richard. Her teacher's retirement account, the life insurance policy, and the investment account were all in her name only. The house she and Richard lived in was jointly titled, as were their checking and savings accounts. But the majority of her wealth, approximately $850,000 between the retirement account, investment account, and life insurance, remained separate property that she could distribute according to her own wishes. I had no idea it was this much, she admitted as we totaled everything up. Your parents were good savers, and you've been contributing to your retirement account for 30 years. It adds up. Richard always handles our joint finances. I just assumed he knew about all of this. Did you ever discuss your separate assets with him? Not in detail. He knows about the retirement account because I get statements, but I don't think he knows how much is in it. And I never mentioned the life insurance policy because you've been handling the payments. We spent another hour updating her beneficiary designations on all accounts. She decided to leave the retirement account jointly to me and Richard's children, the investment account entirely to me, and the life insurance policy unchanged with me as sole beneficiary. Is this fair? She asked as we finished the paperwork. It's your money, Mom. Fair is whatever you decide it is. I keep thinking about what Richard said. Only blood family deserves inheritance. But you've been more family to me than anyone else. You visit regularly, you help with my finances, you include me in your life. His children are polite, but they're not really part of my daily existence. They're part of Richard's life, which makes them part of yours. In some ways. But when I think about who I trust, who I rely on, who would take care of me if I got sick, it's you. That has to count for something. 2 months later, I was reviewing quarterly profit reports for the restaurant when my assistant knocked on my office door. "Patricia, your stepfather is here asking to speak with you. He seems upset about something." I found Richard in the main dining room, pacing near the host station. It was 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, between lunch and dinner service, so the restaurant was nearly empty. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "Of course. Would you like to sit down?" "I'll stand. This won't take long." His face was flushed, and I could see a vein throbbing at his temple. Whatever had prompted this visit, he was genuinely angry. "Linda told me about your little financial planning session," he began. "Going through her accounts, updating beneficiaries, making decisions without including me. I helped her review her personal financial documents at her request. I didn't think that required your involvement. I'm her husband. Everything she owns affects both of us. Her separate property affects her. Your separate property affects you. That's how separate property works. Don't get smart with me. I know what you're doing." "What am I doing?" "You're manipulating an old woman into giving you money that should stay in the family." The accusation was so absurd that I almost laughed. Instead, I kept my voice level and professional. "Richard, I've been paying Mom's life insurance premiums for 8 years. I've never asked her for money, never needed her financial support, never even discussed her estate planning, until she specifically requested my help. That life insurance policy should have my name on it. We're married. Then you should have discussed that with her when you got married 8 years ago. I didn't know about it. That's between you and Mom." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening tone. "I know what you're worth, Patricia. I know about this restaurant, your property investments, your business accounts. You don't need Linda's money." I felt a chill of unease. Richard had been investigating my finances, which suggested this conversation was about more than just Mom's life insurance policy. "You're right. I don't need Mom's money, which is why I've never asked for it." "Then why not do the right thing? Convince her to change those beneficiaries to include my children. They're family too. They're your family. They'll inherit from you." "That's not the point." "What is the point?" "The point is respect. Recognition. My children have been part of this family for 8 years. They deserve to be acknowledged." I understood now. This wasn't really about money. It was about validation. Richard wanted Mom's assets to flow to his children as proof that they were her real family, just like he declared at her birthday party. "Richard, I can't convince Mom to do anything with her money. And I wouldn't try to. Those are her decisions to make. We'll see about that." He turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving me with an uncomfortable feeling that this wasn't over. That evening, Mom called me in tears. "He's furious," she said through the phone. "He's been yelling for an hour about family loyalty and blood relations and how you're manipulating me. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. He wants me to change all the beneficiaries to include Marcus and Cheryl equally. He says it's only fair since we're all one family now." "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. I love Richard, but I feel like he's trying to control decisions that should be mine to make. And his children, they're nice enough, but they're not my children. They have their own mother, their own family traditions. I don't understand why they should inherit from me. You don't have to justify your decisions to anyone, including Richard. But it's causing problems in my marriage. He says if I don't include his children, it proves I don't really consider them family. Do you consider them family?" She was quiet for a long moment. I consider them Richard's children whom I care about because I care about him. But that's different from considering them my children, isn't it? Only you can answer that. I keep thinking about what would happen if something happened to me tomorrow. Who would handle my affairs? Who would make sure my wishes were carried out? Who would take care of the details? Probably whoever you name as executor of your will. And who would I trust to do that job properly? The answer hung unspoken between us. We both knew that if Mom died tomorrow, I would be the one handling funeral arrangements, settling her affairs, and ensuring her wishes were respected. Richard would be greeting and dealing with his own emotional needs. His children would be focused on supporting their father. I would be the one managing the logistics. I'm going to stick with my original decision, she said finally. It's my money, and I'll distribute it however I think is right. Are you sure? I don't want to cause problems in your marriage. You're not causing problems. Richard's expectations are causing problems. 6 months later, I was preparing to leave for a restaurant industry conference in Miami when my assistant handed me a certified letter that had arrived that morning. The return address was from Richard's attorney. Inside was a formal legal notice informing me that Richard was contesting Mom's recent beneficiary changes on the grounds of undue influence and financial manipulation. The letter demanded that I provide all documentation related to my financial relationship with Mom, including records of the life insurance premium payments and any other financial transactions between us. I immediately called Sandra, my attorney. This is intimidation, she said after reading the letter. He has no legal standing to contest beneficiary designations on accounts that belong solely to your mother. Can he cause problems anyway? He can try, but the law is clear. As long as your mother is mentally competent and made these decisions voluntarily, no one can override her choices regarding her separate property. What about the undue influence claim? Difficult to prove when you've been financially supporting her rather than taking money from her. The premium payment history actually works in your favor. It shows you've been acting in her best interests for years. Should I be worried? Not legally, but this kind of harassment can be stressful and time-consuming. I'd recommend documenting everything and avoiding any direct confrontation with Richard. The conference in Miami provided a welcome distraction from family drama. I spent 3 days learning about new restaurant technologies, networking with other owners, and attending workshops on menu development and staff management. It felt good to focus on my business instead of Richard's legal threats. When I returned, I found a voicemail from Mom asking me to call her urgently. Richard collapsed at work yesterday, she said when I reached her. He had a massive heart attack. He's in the ICU at Presbyterian Hospital. I drove immediately to the hospital, where I found Mom in the cardiac care waiting room with Marcus and Cheryl. They looked up when I arrived, their expressions ranging from surprise to hostile. How is he? I asked Mom. Critical but stable. The doctors say the next 48 hours will be crucial. I sat beside her, offering whatever comfort I could. Despite our recent conflicts, I didn't want Richard to die. He was Mom's husband, and his death would devastate her. The doctors want to talk to family members about his care options, Marcus said pointedly. Real family members. Marcus, Mom said sharply. This isn't the time. When is the time? When we're dealing with funeral arrangements? When we're trying to figure out his business assets? When Patricia's trying to take control of everything? The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Here we were, in a hospital waiting room while Richard fought for his life, and his son was still focused on excluding me from family decisions. I'm not trying to take control of anything, I said quietly. I just want to support Mom through this. by manipulating her finances and turning her against Dad's children. That's enough, Mom said, standing up abruptly. I won't listen to this anymore. She walked out of the waiting room, leaving me alone with Marcus and Cheryl. The silence was uncomfortable, but not entirely unwelcome. You know he's right, Cheryl said finally. About you manipulating Mom. We know what you've been doing. What have I been doing? Playing the devoted daughter while scheming to cut us out of her will. Paying her bills so she feels obligated to you. It's calculated and manipulative. I looked at her. This woman who visited Mom maybe once a month, who called only when she needed something, who had never once offered to help with Mom's finances or medical appointments or household maintenance. Cheryl, I've been paying Mom's life insurance premiums for 8 years because I love her and want her to be financially secure. If that seems calculating to you, I'm sorry you interpret family responsibility that way. Family responsibility? You're not even really family. According to who? According to Dad. According to genetics. According to reality. I could have pointed out that I'd been Mom's daughter for 41 years while Cheryl had been her stepdaughter for 8. I could have mentioned that I was the one who drove Mom to doctor's appointments, helped her with technology problems, and called her every week just to chat. I could have explained that family is built through years of daily choices and shared experiences, not through DNA percentages or legal ceremonies. Instead, I just said, I think we'll have to agree to disagree about what makes someone family. Richard survived the heart attack, but required bypass surgery and weeks of recovery. During his hospitalization, I watched Mom transform from a wife seeking permission for her decisions into a woman remembering her own strength. Without Richard's daily opinions and expectations, she began making choices based on her own preferences rather than his approval. I've been thinking, she told me one afternoon as we walked through the hospital corridor after visiting Richard, about family and loyalty and what we owe each other. What conclusions have you reached? That love shouldn't require you to diminish other people you love. Richard wants me to prove my loyalty to his children by being disloyal to you. That's not how family should work. People have different definitions of family. Maybe, but I think mine is better. She stopped walking and turned to face me. I want you to know that regardless of what happens with Richard's health, regardless of what legal threats he makes, regardless of how his children treat you, you are my daughter. You're my family. And my financial decisions reflect that reality. Thank you. That means everything to me. I also want you to know that I'm proud of what you've built with your restaurant. I'm proud of your independence and your success. I'm proud that you've never needed to depend on anyone else's money or approval to create the life you wanted. We resumed walking, both lost in our own thoughts. Can I ask you something? She said as we reached the parking garage. Of course. If something happens to me, will you take care of Richard? I know he's been difficult, but he's still family. I'll make sure he's taken care of, I promised. Even after everything he said. Family takes care of family, even difficult family. Richard recovered fully from his surgery, though the experience seemed to change his perspective on several things. He never formally apologized for the legal threats or the accusations about financial manipulation, but he stopped making them. Perhaps facing his own mortality had given him different priorities. Marcus and Cheryl remained distant, continuing to view me as an outsider who had somehow stolen their rightful inheritance. But they were civil during family gatherings, and that felt like progress. Mom's beneficiary designations remained unchanged. Her retirement account would be split equally among me, Marcus, and Cheryl, a compromise that acknowledged their place in her life without diminishing mine. Her investment account and life insurance policy remained solely in my name, providing her with the security of knowing someone she trusted completely would handle her final affairs. 2 years later, at Mom's 67th birthday party, this one held at my restaurant, but organized as a true celebration rather than a power demonstration, Richard stood up to make a toast. "Linda, you've taught me a lot about family over the past few years," he said, his voice more subdued than the booming confidence of previous years. "You've shown me that loyalty isn't about blood or legal documents. It's about who shows up, who pays attention, who cares enough to act." He paused, looking around the table at his children, at me, at Mom. "I want to thank Patricia for taking care of you in ways I didn't always understand or appreciate, and I want to apologize for making things more complicated than they needed to be. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was acknowledgement, and sometimes acknowledgement is the first step toward understanding." That evening, as I cleaned up after the party, Mom helped me stack chairs and collect leftover flowers. "That went better than expected," she said. "Much better. I think Richard is finally starting to understand that having me in his life doesn't require him to control my other relationships. That's a valuable lesson for anyone to learn. I'm grateful we made it through all of that drama without losing each other," she said, squeezing my hand. "Family is supposed to support each other, not compete for position." I couldn't agree more. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how much had changed since that first birthday announcement about real family only. We'd all learned something about the difference between biological relationships and chosen family, between inherited obligations and earned loyalty. The life insurance policy remained in my name. The premiums still automatically deducted from my business account each month. But it was no longer a symbol of exclusion or manipulation. It was simply what it had always been: one family member taking care of another, ensuring security, and demonstrating love through practical action. And perhaps that's the most real definition of family there is.